Welcome to the Brokers Open Podcast. Today we sit down with co-owner of Bay to Bay Properties, Joe Faw. We talk about scalability, being intentional every single day, setting a schedule, and office culture. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Palm Media. Palm Media is a boutique digital marketing company built for realtors by realtors. They help agents and teams dominate a target market with specific, tailored strategies. Everything from video, chatbots, landing pages, Facebook ads, database management, and coaching. And oh my gosh, it is way more affordable and simple than you could ever imagine. Call now for 100% free strategy session, whether you have a budget or not. Dr. Ben, my good friend, will make sure that you are heading in the right direction, building your presence online, or flat out crushing your competition. Before you spend a dime on marketing, door knocking, or sending out postcards, call Palm Media, 813-765-7706, 813-765-7706, or click the link in the description below. Manifest your paradise. Well, gang,
here we are again.
Podcast Friday.
Love it, love it, love it.
We got a real esteemed guest on today.
Absolutely.
Somebody that I've personally admired in his business culture and what he's built over the last.
As soon as you told me, I was like, man, we got to get him on here.
Yeah. And then you start peeling back the onion and realizing exactly what he does and what what his co-owners do and his 75 employees or whatever it is. It's insane.
Holy cow. Wow.
So, without further ado, Joe Faw, Bay to Bay Properties. Welcome, brother.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love having you on here. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you got your business to where you got it and everything. But first, let's dig into who Joe is. Tell us a little bit about where you live, all that kind of stuff. What do you like to do? What's your favorite hobby?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a homegrown Florida boy.
Okay.
Was born in Dunedin.
Gotcha.
Through my adolescence, lived in Canada for a year and a half.
Oh wow.
When I was real young, Toronto.
Oh nice.
Don't remember a lot of it, but we did go there. And then England for 3 years.
Wow.
And then came back here in third grade.
So tell me you're a soccer fan. Please tell me you're a soccer fan.
I am. It was either...
Dude,
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that. So, yeah, Matt's big into soccer. And
yeah, I mean, we only had 2 state championships and we're studs and that kind of... But,
right. That's it, huh?
No, but, in England, it's kind of, you get to choose between soccer or cricket.
Right.
And so we kind of chose soccer and it
stuck
with us a little bit. So,
yeah
it was fun. Big part of our adolescence there.
Right.
So it was back in, went to high school in Clearwater Central Catholic.
Okay.
Went to college at Florida State for a couple years.
Right.
And then transferred out to University of San Diego.
Nice.
That was probably the start of the whole real estate construction world for me. My teacher out there, Dr. Mark Reedy, was actually ex-president for Fannie Mae.
Oh,
so
wow.
That was interesting.
I didn't know that.
Oh, that's incredible.
And at the time, he actually asked me to be president of the Student Builders Association. And you got to remember, I grew up in a situation where I was very blessed in a lot of different ways, but my father was not a construction guy.
Right.
So I still to this day don't even know how to change the oil in my car or anything like that. So, but anyway, so I started doing really good in his classes, Dr. Reedy's classes. And so he kind of took a liking to me and we created a relationship and it was just something I was good at. So that kind of morphed into being interested and then some internships in entrepreneurial type companies. One was called Myers Group.
Okay.
Which was basically think of a consulting group that would kind of go in and when there's big master plan developments, they would do a lot. So I would be kind of the guy doing some of the research, printing the papers out, giving them to the people.
How old were you at this point?
I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah, so you...
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And that's a good question because I mean, just being totally honest, I had no clue what I was doing.
Right.
I had no clue about anything. I'm the president of the Student Builder Association. I really don't even know how to build anything. So it was more just like kind of putting myself out there, going through the motions.
Yeah, but the professor had to see something. There had to have been a conversation. There had to have been a homework assignment or something. And he was like, "Hey, wait a minute. This is my guy."
I should ask him. I'd like to think that I could put my pen. Exactly. This is what happened and kind of change course. I don't know exactly. I will say this though. I was an average student growing up. Kind of like back then you could get a 3.0 and your parents were happy and that was good, well-rounded and that kind of thing. So I was definitely I was definitely that guy. I think I got a 3.3, so that was kind of good.
Right.
But when I got into the real estate classes at University of San Diego, I just started doing a little bit better, and a lot of them were not like multiple choice. It was kind of you had to write things out, and I don't know if you guys remember there was these blue books.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of where it just started getting easy for me. So it was the first time in life that I kind of looked at school as like, wow, I don't mind going to this class. It's pretty easy. and I didn't have to like stress to get through it. So anyway, so that happened. Then I surfed a lot in between.
Of course, you're in San Diego. Of course you did.
did a trip down in the South Pacific, and so we hit Fiji, New Zealand, Australia, Maldives, and so that was a good time in life. It also helped me at that time. I remember, we were surfing a lot, and when I mean a lot, like basically 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night, trying to eat in between, eating 5,000 calories just so you're not like bonking,
exhausted out there.
Yeah. But I remember one time in Australia, my brother and I were surfing in a place called Byron Bay, and the next day he's like, "Hey, let's go," and I'm like, "Man, I can't," and he was like, "What's wrong?" And I remember I was literally kind of teary-eyed at a point, and I'm like, "I don't know, I don't want to." And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, "You go today, I'll be fine." And so I just remember like feeling a weird, like an emptiness almost.
Right.
And so what I did that day is I went to the public library, and I just decided to read. And so for 2 days straight, I just read books.
What'd you read?
One of them was Kiyosaki.
Oh yeah.
What's that?
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad was one of them.
Yeah.
That was actually, I think, it was only 2 days, so I was kind of just reading that book, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But my point for bringing that up was that it was when a lot of guys talk about now, oh, well, wouldn't it be fun to just go to an island and hang out or go to a boat? The retirement kind of talk. I always remember that feeling that I had of emptiness, and the best way that I describe it at this time in my life was that I just felt like my brain was going to mush a little bit, and I wasn't using my talents properly. So I guess that was kind of like a blessing in disguise, because it's like, hey, yeah, it's cool to surf, but it's not cool to surf every single day.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think that kind of lends itself to balance in life and things like that. So with that, came back to Tampa.
So hang on, you just threw out a lot, man.
Sorry.
No, that was a sweet. That was
absolutely.
We could dive into that. Go ahead.
All right, so let's step back to you being engaged in class and your professor seeing something, and he knew you didn't have any building experience, but he saw something in you and said, "Hey, look, let's dig into this with him." And you were able to excel at that. So many times real estate agents, what they struggle with is they think that if they like to see houses, they think that if they like to show houses to people, that automatically makes them great at real estate. And so you didn't have to build houses to be great at what you did, let alone take you on a good career path. You just had to have some fundamental drive on something that you wanted to accomplish, and knew that there was a bigger picture to it. And this professor saw the same thing in you. That's huge.
What Joe's like strength in my eyes, because Joe and I have had a few conversations over the last couple of years, whether it be at different events or even just at friends' houses and whatnot. He has that it factor, and when people are around Joe, people are drawn to him and to his story.
Right.
And so what he's really good at is being able to make people feel comfortable and being able to be really agile in a conversation. Just something that I've observed with you. So, I mean, that is so applicable in so many different industries. It just so happens that you followed your passion in construction.
Right.
I mean, had it not been construction for Joe, I promise you he would have still
succeeded in something else. Yeah.
So it's fun to do that, and that's why I called John Downs. Is like, we need to have Joe on like stat, and he's like, yeah, we'll make sure that happens.
Yeah.
So Gary V talks about having to have noise around him. I'm one of those people that have to have noise. I moved to Tortola for about 6 months whenever I was 19 years old. Okay, and the I got there, shook off the jet lag. Can you imagine me just sitting? No. Okay, so even back then. I got there and I thought I was just going to be able to kind of take it easy, do a little bit of construction, all that kind of stuff, and just live that beach life. About 3 days in, I'm like, man, what a family that I'm good friends with since 5th grade. I'm like, what do we do now?
Driving yourself mad.
I can't just sit here. Are you kidding me? We're going to the beach again? There's got to be something else we got to do. Sounds like the same thing happened with you. As much as you love doing that, something clicked in your head and said, look, man, we can't be idle. We got to have that noise.
Yeah.
Got to have those things going.
No, for sure. We hired a guy recently that, he's kind of been out of the game, so to speak, for the last 4 or 5 years. And I asked him, I said, hey, what's making you come back? And I go, for real, what's making you come back into the industry? And he goes, to be dead honest with you, he goes, I want the headaches again.
Yeah.
And I was like,
problem solving.
You get that.
And so again, I think a lot of, the headache, so to speak, or, the noise kind of to you and what Gary Vee was saying is just, it's also just that perspective of wanting to feel engaged and be around something. And,
be relevant.
You mentioned the word passion, and you said passion about construction, I actually, passion is a word I struggle with.
Right.
Because I just think the way that it gets
fleeting.
messaged sometimes. Yeah. And, you know, the younger generation, you know, hey, do what you're passionate about.
Right.
And so sometimes, like, what I like to say to guys is, like, hey, find out what you don't like.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's easier to find out what you don't like compared to what you do like.
Totally.
And so, you know, especially
And what you like changes.
Yeah. And you know, from the age of 18 to 25, I mean, to me, it's a beautiful time in life to figure out what you're not good at and what you don't like.
Right.
And to me, that's easier than trying to, like, hey, I'm gonna say I like this, and now I feel like I need to stick with it. And then you're changing majors, you're doing all these different things. So, for me, it was never about I'm passionate about construction or I'm not.
Right.
And it also just had to do with what you're good at. And
Yeah.
so for me, I kind of realized that I was decent at kind of what I call connecting the dots.
Yeah.
So, okay, real estate, right? So I want to sell a house. Well, how do you know the person? Is it good use of your time? You know, I learned a long time ago, you make more money in life saying no than yes.
Right.
There was a guy out in California that I met that was a real estate broker, and he literally said, he goes, the first question that I ask any single client that I have in terms of listing their house is, do you need, not want,
Absolutely.
do you need to sell the house in the next 30 days? Yeah. If the answer was yes, he would take the listing. If the answer was no, he would share it with his team.
Yeah, sure.
And so, and everyone was kind of like, well, why are you crushing it? Why are your, you know, every single metric he was getting better, right? His use of time, because at the end of the day, we all want like work-life balance. We really only want to work 50 hours a week, or should. Anybody that says they're working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and they're bragging, to me, that's kind of like, that's not.
Yeah, Justin talks about how efficient people are with their time all the time, saying that same exact thing. So we hear this actually from the high-performing people that we deal with. We hear this a lot. Are you committed to winning, or do you want to win? Because there's a big difference between the two.
Difference.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that broker going and sitting down at that listing appointment was seeing if that seller was committed to getting the house sold, or if they just wanted to get the house sold.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that if they don't want it, they can't have it, because there's some people that want to succeed in real estate and they end up finding it. The people that do it at a very high level are the ones that are committed to it.
Right.
Just like those sellers. And that's brilliant of him to
And the proof actually comes out over time. What's funny about that is that there's a lot of talk, whether it be in construction or real estate, is that you have a lot of people who talk the talk.
Oh yeah.
And what's beautiful about life is that just gets filtered out.
Yep.
And kind of going back to what Joe said earlier is, you know, you got to find out what you're not good at, especially early on in life.
Right.
And in order to do that, I think the key aspect to that in my mind, correct me if I'm wrong, but you got to get out of your comfort zone in order to find out what your weaknesses and your strengths are.
For sure. And I think, you know, what I've learned is that a lot of anxiety and what maybe we'll call perceived weaknesses is actually in your own head. It's not, it doesn't actually really exist.
Oh, yeah.
That's
That
such a good
exists. That's
point.
exactly
I
right.
love that. Yeah.
So
100%.
You know, I think it's Mark Twain has this analogy that if you or metaphor basically, if you eat a frog in the morning, nothing else bad will happen to you the rest
That's
of the day.
exactly right.
And so
Eat the frog first.
yeah, so I actually, one of our project managers, I bought him a frog keychain. And I said, hey, when you're putting together your to-do list, put this frog next to the,
That's
let's say
badass.
there's 10 things. Because we always have, hey, we have 10 things to do. These 3 I don't want to do. So you end up doing them
Absolutely.
last. And so if you think about that during the course of a day, you know, now you're thinking about it for 6-7 hours. It gets...
It drains you.
It drains you.
The bad things, you have to attack those bad things, perceived bad things.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head with that. Those perceived bad things, you have to hit them with the highest level of energy.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is put those off after you burn out so much of your energy and time and thought power and willpower on all the other things that are easier to do. And then you try to go to those at the end of the day, and it ends up being a disaster.
And what I've learned is that 90% of the time, they're never as bad as you thought they were.
Yep.
And even if they are, you kind of already thought it anyway. So like, what's the big deal?
That's
And
exactly
there's
right.
ways to turn them into fun, and that's why I always preach to any realtor out there is get your prospecting done in the morning straight away. So do your
Absolutely.
2 hours of prospecting, whatever that looks like to you.
Right.
But that's the dirty work, and then you can have the rest of your day to do what you need to
Look
do.
at your day differently. You
Yeah.
tackle it differently. So we've interrupted like 90 times. You're 19 still in this story.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, sorry, that's right.
So
I'm a little
so
older
maybe
than
let's
that
get
now.
to 20.
So,
Let's step
Joe
forward.
is 66 today. Congratulations.
Oh man, obviously I'm hitting 40 in July, so
Yeah.
over the hill, right? So at 19, so graduated from University of San Diego, did the little surf trip that I told you about, and then came back and went to grad school got my MBA at University of Tampa with an emphasis in entrepreneurship.
Nice.
So that was I think I finished right around 23. So it was December of when I was 23 years old. We started the business 6 months. I still had 6 months left of school. So it's actually, I don't know if it's exactly today, but in the next couple days is our 16th anniversary for Beta Bay.
What? Congratulations.
So we started in June of 2003. And Beta Bay Properties is kind of an interesting story as well in terms of the name.
You keep
I
saying
love this part. I was really hoping you would
I told
tell
you
me
this, yeah. So when I lived out in San Diego, there's, you've got Mission Bay, which is right by SeaWorld, and there's San Diego Bay, which is where all the, the Navy ships and all that kind of stuff come in. So, and then we were from Tampa Bay, right? So it was like, San Diego Bay, Mission Bay was where I lived. And then I was like, Beta Bay. And at that time, we were flipping a few properties and doing that kind of thing as well. And we'll say, we'll just say properties. And I guess in a nativity moment, we're sitting there saying, we'll take over basically all of I-10 from San Diego to Tampa. So that's where Beta Bay and then the properties came from. I actually tried to change the name to Beta Bay Construction about 6 or 7 years ago. And Pinellas County Construction License Board got upset with me because we changed the name, or like our signage said Beta Bay Construction, but that wasn't our actually legal name.
Right.
So, hey, your license isn't tied to that. So I got a little upset. I'm like, can I appeal to a board or something? I'm like, all right, let's just let it go. And, so that's kind of where the name came from. So
that's really cool.
Was in grad school. I think I got, to your point, getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, I'd be lying if I said, all I wanted to do was start my own business, or I wanted, it was more just, the reason I went to grad school was because my dad was being very fortunate. He said, hey, I'll make sure that I help you, assist you with tuition and things like that, as long as you take it seriously and do a good job and go.
Right.
So the real reason I went to grad school was because I didn't want to start a real job yet, right? And then the reason that we even started Beta Bay was, I can remember it like it was yesterday. The teacher was teaching us what's the difference between an LLC and an S Corp. And then I go to Jerome, who's one of our business partners, and I said, hey man, I just learned how to start an LLC. You just have to go online, do these kind of things. I go, you want to call it Beta Bay? And let's do it. So again, I want to point out that it wasn't as intentional as I am now, and it just kind of worked out a little bit. And again, you have to remember back then, we started doing some remodels, kitchens, so that I remember my tax return that first year was like $7,900.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I was fortunate because I didn't have a family at that time, and so there weren't expenses that I was dealing with, or large expenses. So anyway, so from that standpoint, that's kind of like the germination and how we kind of came about.
So who's the we? So you mentioned Jerome, right?
Yeah.
So who's the we?
Jerome was our business partner. So him and I started the business when we were both 23 years old. We're a month apart. I met him in high school at CCC.
Okay.
He was 14 years old. We were in the same homeroom class together.
Right. I got you.
So the way that Beta Bay the way I think about it is kind of like in two parts. What I'll call the figuring it out years, and then what I would call maybe real business.
Right.
So right at the age of getting into my late 20s, I think like 27, 28, right actually in the downturn. So called the downturn, I don't know exactly, but let's call it like end of 07 to kind of 2010-ish. John Downs came into and I've known John since high school as well. He was a couple years older than me, but he said, hey, I've got this opportunity to do a Dollar General over on the east coast of Florida.
Wow.
And we're like, well, I don't know how to do something that far away. Who would run the project? How do we get a superintendent? That kind of thing. So that kind of came together, and that was when we really started doing more commercial work, because up to that point we were doing a lot of single family houses, building them. We probably built, I don't know exactly, but between
So were you 100% commercial now?
We're 100% commercial now.
Okay.
And in the story, we were 100% residential then, or 95% residential then. So right around 2009, 2010 is when we started doing some of those dollar stores. And because we were so lean and didn't have a ton of overhead, and we figured them out pretty quickly, we were actually able to put a dent into that. And regarding Family Dollar in particular, one thing that I would say about them is that the fact that we didn't have, we weren't those guys that said, we did this back for the last 20 years, I've been doing it like that. And we just kind of, because Family Dollar had some certain criteria that they wanted, how to run projects and how to get paid properly and that. And so we kind of just conformed to what they wanted, as opposed to trying to sell them on this is how we do it. And so that was really, and then we built probably 40, 50, 60 of those dollar stores. And so that was really kind of what got us through into the 2011, 2012, and then it just kind of grew from there.
So what stuck out to me right there was the value process, and a lot of people, even successful companies, get in their own way about
That's right.
spouting about how
Absolutely.
they've gotten there and what their model is. But
And why
what you
it's
did
better. Yeah.
is you listened to the client
Yeah.
and curtailed everything to the client. Little did they know, your
Right.
experience
You-
may have been completely residential, but
Right.
I find that fascinating.
And that you didn't have the experience to come in and say, hey, you got to do it my way because this is how I've always done it. You were able to stay nimble with that. Do you still stay nimble like that? If you meet
Yeah.
clients, do you still work with them through the process, or are you in a position in your business now where you can just say, hey, I'm rigid about how these things are done?
It's that's a good question, and it's getting harder now
Yeah.
to be
Yeah,
as nimble,
sure.
right?
Right.
And so there's the right way to us,
Oh, yeah.
and it's got to be systems oriented. It's got to fit into like what our systems are, so that we can process them easier. It's not
Absolutely.
Chinese fire drill, like we said. We all only have 50 hours a week, so.
Right.
In order to be scalable and sustainable, you have to come with your own process and make sure things fit in your box as well.
Or say no.
Or say no.
That's right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think from a reasonableness standpoint, every client wants something a little bit different,
Right.
right? And so you can try to fight them on that, or you can just, what we try to do is we try to understand the game book
Right.
before we're engaged, and then we can make a good decision whether to say no or
Sure.
yes.
Right.
And so, there's
That's
lots
smart.
of situations I could point to, especially in the last couple of years, that people have tried to engage us in certain things, and we've gotten really good at asking good questions, right?
So- All right, so
That's everything, man.
Again, we're going to hopefully get you out of your 20s here in a minute.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm enjoying this a lot. This is good.
so he has a system for doing things, and then whenever he meets the clients and customers, he knows how to deliver a system well enough so that if it needs to shift and change as he's interviewing, as he's talking to them, he can shift and change the parts that can fit into a system, so he still delivers at a high level.
Right.
Versus just going in and not having a system. This is to some people out there, I'm sure.
Listen.
Going in and have a system and know what you want to do, and then listen to the client and fit them into the system, or cut them loose. Move on to the next one, say no to them, and go back to the people that do fit into your system. That way you know you're delivering at a high level.
Yeah.
Right? Did I miss that?
No, you didn't. And I think what I would
That's
add to
huge.
that as well, kind of to piggyback it, is when you think about the word consistency, right?
Yeah.
It's easier to think about widgets, right?
Right.
So a widget is synonymous with, let's say, a Starbucks coffee. If I'm in Hong Kong, or I'm somewhere in Europe, or I'm in Clearwater, Florida, more or less that
the
coffee,
same, yeah.
whatever, grande, blah, 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 tastes the exact same,
Right.
So to me, Starbucks has done a really good job of providing a consistent product in a
Right.
scalable way, in a sustainable fashion throughout the entire world.
Right.
You could point to companies like McDonald's,
Absolutely.
carts. So it's easier to point to products, right? When it's the service business, whether it's real estate or construction and you're dealing with people, the question we always keep asking ourselves is, how are we providing a consistent experience?
Great point.
And what ends up happening is that, we've got 10 project managers now. So, is one project manager sending in submittals the same way? Are they sending in RFIs the same way? Are they sending it, are they doing things the same so that the client is having a similar experience with Beta Bay,
Sure.
not only an experience with the person?
Absolutely huge.
And also, if you think about it, like when you start scaling and sustainable, so from a real estate standpoint, if you have teams, right?
Right.
Like you want to make sure that your clients are all having the similar
Absolutely.
experience, because what's going to happen is that when the client we're in the repeat business world, and I know
Right.
a lot of
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
clients are too. You don't want the constraint of saying,
Absolutely.
oh well, I want Justin.
Right.
I
Right.
only want to deal with Justin.
Right.
For my project manager, I only want to deal with Ben. I only want to deal with Jan.
Right.
And so I would rather them say, I want to deal with Beta Bay.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a position where I've got 10
100%
project
agree.
managers, depending on resource allocation constraints. Like I can sit there and say, okay, well, yeah, I've got so-and-so available for you. And
Right.
same thing with superintendents. So I guess my point for saying that is that we want to make sure that people are having an experience with Beta Bay, not the people. And we also want to make sure, like we're at a point now where the business is bigger than me. The business is bigger
Sure.
than, Kate, our CFO. The business is bigger than Jerome. It's bigger than John. So I view it as a team. And I always like using analogies on football, whether it's Belichick or Alabama, everybody just play your role.
Yeah.
Understand what role you signed up for.
Absolutely
Good with
huge
your
point.
role and play
Absolutely
your role.
huge.
So
Yeah, huge point. Absolutely. So there's again like 15 things off
Sorry,
of that. But
No, it's
keep
perfect.
it going.
This is
It's
sick.
absolutely perfect. So so we both do coaching, and so I focus on the 6 C's, which is coaching, culture, communication, consistency, convenience, and commission. Right. Consistency. If you don't have it, what that happens in your team is it allows someone else to build a brand inside your brand. And it's not bad that they have an identity inside if you've got a team, an identity inside your brand. It does run into an issue if you're running a team. It's different in a real estate office, but in a team, if you have 3 or 4 different brands underneath your brand as the team leader, automatically that dilutes what you're trying to provide. It dilutes that consistency, and again, you end up with people saying, "Hey, I want to do this," and it puts a different strain on your resources because now that person's doing it the way they want to instead of the way Beta Properties
Yeah, and the
want it
chain
to.
breaks.
That's right.
I mean, this is so applicable to so many of our guests, but what
Absolutely.
immediately came to my mind was Captain Tom Chavey when he did. They would go on, nightly missions or what have you, and the biggest thing to him was consistency and structure.
Yep.
And in particular for him and for the success of his teams were post-op briefs.
Yep.
And the post-op briefs kept them, reliable in the sense that no matter how tired you were, how terrible that op went, it wasn't going to bed. It wasn't going to do anything like that. We're going to have a post-op brief with the team and make sure that we figure out what we did wrong, what we could do better. And
On the same page.
Yeah, and that in a business culture is so applicable.
Huge. I love it that you're singing. That's the same sheet of music. You're singing the same sheet of music with so many other guests that we've had on. That's fantastic.
No, for sure. And I think, again, that's applicable through all industries.
Yeah,
not just,
it is.
Right?
Agreed.
And I think, when you think about people, I'm big on attitude. And so the debriefing or lessons learned, those kind of things, right? Like every single experience is not win-lose, right? It's win, okay, I get it. And then when you do lose, well, what did you learn?
Right.
And you can either just be frustrated at losing, or you can potentially look at it as, wow, I won.
Totally.
Why'd you win? Well, because I experienced certain things that I didn't before, and now I have the opportunity
100%.
to look at it and get better. So one of the things that we're doing in our office, we have standard operating procedures and we have certain milestones that we have. And one of the things that we're doing is a look back report. And so that's kind of coming here by third quarter. And the interesting part about the look back report that we're finding is that we need to make sure that we have a company look back. So for example, if there's a superintendent on a job site that has a problem with a subcontractor, he might remember how did that project go? The electrician was horrible. Okay, well, maybe 95% of it was really good, and your opinion was that the electrician was horrible. Well, why was the electrician horrible? Maybe, right? There's lots of different variables. So again, in terms of consistency, we need to make sure that Beta Bay is providing a consistent look back or a debrief to the next person that's potentially doing the job from a lessons learned standpoint from a Beta Bay, and I'm not filtering it just through one person's eyes that maybe doesn't have all the perspective.
So what do you think there'd be a benefit for team leaders at the end of the week after all their transactions to have a quick debrief with their whole team on what went well and what didn't?
Yeah, I would say that I'm guilty of this, and I see this happen to people who see success early on in their careers. And I remember this specifically happening to me early on in my career, is that I would look at the wins that I was having and not really try to understand and get better at them. I'm like, holy shit, I am the man. I just nailed this, Right. And what really happens over your career is that you start to analyze whether the win or the quote unquote loss, you learn from it. But
absolutely,
having that ability to check your ego at the door.
So how much would you pay? Don't mean to interrupt. How much would you pay to have a debrief from all of your transactions up until now?
Oh my
what
God.
do you think that would do to your customer service? I can't wait to see what happens in third quarter whenever y'all launch this. You absolutely have to keep us informed on that. That's freaking fantastic.
No, it really is. I mean, that's who came. I mean, not to say that who came up with the idea, but I mean, I think that is a genius strategy.
So I got to give credit to Kate in our office,
Nice.
Kate Rogers. She's our
brilliant.
CFO. Yeah.
It is.
And again, I mean, it's very simple when you say lessons learned. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody that's a cliche kind of comment.
Absolutely.
And so now the function is, yes, it's lessons learned, look back, debrief, whatever you want to call it. But what's the format that you're going to put it in, right? So that you can share it, so it truly becomes scalable and sustainable for the next PM. Because if we're building a Wawa, right, and I let's say there's 6 Wawas that I need to build, well, I probably can't just give it to one PM. So how do I take what I learned from the first one that we did,
Absolutely.
share that properly with the next one? And to me, it goes even one step further. So when you start getting into clients, right, and you start talking about clients' personalities, their communication styles, things like that, we're big on the DISC profile.
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
But what we're doing is we're actually thinking through ways that because in our world, everything starts with business development. Then it goes into estimating, then it goes into operations, and then FinComp deals with it in terms of closing things out, basically throughout the whole process, but that's kind of like the sequencing. Right. So we're trying extremely hard to say, okay, let's say Jerome, he runs the estimating department. So his team had an experience with a client for 2 months.
Right.
Then all of a sudden we literally take a binder, hand it off to operations.
Yeah.
But we're not handing off the relationship well.
Right.
We're not handing off the personality of who you're going to be dealing with well. So for example, wouldn't it be really applicable if we said, oh, by the way, Justin likes to receive things in writing, not phone calls. He also likes to, get pictures on this particular day. He's told, and you can do that just by, hey, Justin, how do you like to receive information? What do your other general contractors, what do you like about them? What don't you like about them? And you basically create this narrative. Now I hand it to my operations guy, and he literally just took 3 months of learning curve. And he knows what to do. Now, as long as he believes it, understands it, and knows how to execute within that framework, it's going to be more successful.
There's no guesswork.
There's not. So I can actually help with that. We should talk afterwards. So I did some personality profile testing for the Criminal Investigative Division of the IRS, and so the biggest thing that you run into with DISC or any of these other programs. So the reason why they wanted us to use a specific program to train people as they were coming through is you can't ask somebody that you're about to audit to fill this out so that you know who you're talking to, right? Because they're gonna botch it because they're gonna try to cheat on it.
Right.
Because
Give you answers that you want to hear.
That's right.
Yeah.
So there are certain environmental and certain habit things and certain ways that people present themselves that allude to personality styles. Mm-hmm. So we can talk for a little bit afterwards whenever we get done, and it's a very easy program to implement. You can implement it with your staff. So they categorize people. And as soon as they hand it off with a single word, I promise they'll be able to tell more about the personality of that person just by that single word and putting them in order.
Yeah, that'd be huge.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So it's and I promise it talks about how they like to receive information. Talks about how are they an organized person, structured person, or are they do they just like the some people whenever you talk to them, they don't want you to email them. They want to talk to you face to face and have the conversation, although the email would allow you to deliver the information a little bit better and a little bit more consistently, a little bit more trackable. But they want to be face to face with it.
And then you need to navigate that, right? So
That's
with,
right.
with something like that, okay, hey, maybe I have the phone call, I talk to you face to face, I appease you in that way, but I also need to
That's
document
right.
the conversation and say, hey, real quick, here's what I heard, here's what we're doing.
Right.
And a lot of times those kind of guys, because they're not written type individuals,
Right.
they won't even respond to that email, but at least you memorialized it, and
That's
then,
exactly
your
right.
other team members know. What we're doing internally with the DISC, and again, if anybody wants to check it out, it's discprofile.com.
Yeah.
discprofile.com. It's just a good tool. DISC is a widely
It's huge.
tool. Yeah.
Right, it is, yeah.
But we're actually doing that internally as well. In our new office, we're building one. We should be ready in about 30, 45 days to move
Nice.
into it. We're putting everybody's DISC
It's exciting.
profile
Uh-huh.
on their door.
Right.
So then that way it's like, oh, because when I'm walking in and let's say I'm in the grind, I can't remember what Justin is in the moment, but if you look at it real quick, it's not, I don't like using the word manipulation in the wrong way, but it's a way to manipulate the conversation or tailor the conversation so that the conversation I'm about to have with
Absolutely.
Justin is super hot, I'm getting the most out of it.
Yeah,
Right.
sure.
Yeah, people like talking to people who are like them, and so if you use that the wrong way, of course, it would turn into manipulation. Otherwise, you're just continuing the rapport that you want to have with them. As long as you're not manipulating, it's good for everybody involved.
Right.
Relationships 101.
That's exactly right.
Look at this beautiful new office, Matt. Look at this thing. Look at that.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is incredible.
Yeah. Explain your office real quick while we're on the subject.
Yeah, that's
I know
a
you got a
story
lot
in
going
itself.
on. Yeah.
So that's approximately an acre in downtown Safety Harbor, right across from the Starbucks on Main
Oh, nice.
Street.
It's like,
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of, we call it in the heart of the dragon.
Right.
So it was briefly, we had to get a development agreement on it. So there's 18,000 square feet of office retail on the front, and then there's 24 apartments in the rear. So overall, I would say, it's been well received by the community. I think from an architectural standpoint, everybody agrees
beautiful,
it's
yeah.
a good
Gorgeous,
looking
yeah.
building. All of our architects did a good job in terms of just the inundulations and kind of tower features and architectural enhancements, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think once it all kind of really comes together, it'll be good. The other thing that I've realized is that since our growth, we actually don't have the best office environments currently, and so a lot of times people talk about open offices and bullpens and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I kind of understand that maybe in the IT world, like if I was at Google and
Right.
but in our world, you got to really be able to think hard and analytical at times. And so we've actually seen the open office field be more distractions.
Sure.
So we're in the new office, we're excited because just the change of the environment and maybe having like a kitchen area that everybody, hey, when you're on a break, you go in that area. You're not just like in the hallway and now because you feel like taking a break. Two other people that are working all of a sudden get sucked into your conversation.
Right, that's right.
So there's no slides in the new office?
There's no slides. No. We were going to do a fireman poll, but no.
That would turn really bad really quick.
Yeah.
For many reasons.
Fireman pole. Whatever you want to tell yourself.
OSHA didn't allow it. So.
Let's blame it on OSHA.
Exactly.
I'll blame it on Downs.
There you go. No, so we're excited because I think just the change of environment is going to be better for us, and I think
That's a big win.
When you talk about culture, right? You can have a good culture, but part of culture. I mean, just us having this conversation right now, right? We're in a certain environment, but if we were sitting at the Sam Pearl lobby looking in the ocean, it's almost like you could do the exact same thing in a different environment, and it just feels different.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Different energy.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions I had for you. I'm glad you brought up the office culture bit.
Yeah. So we're trying to we're excited about that because it'll fix a lot of little things. From a culture standpoint, I feel like we're doing really good on a lot of different fronts.
Right.
I'm also learning that it's never like good enough, right? So at times you feel like you're doing a really good job.
Yeah, don't get comfortable.
Yeah, so I used to get frustrated by that because every now and then an employee would say, well, how come we don't? I'm like, well, remember we do have this. Remember you said you wanted. And so what I've kind of learned is that you just need to try and do what you think is the best, be super authentic about it. And for the most part, it doesn't mean everybody's going to fit in, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, people will see that, appreciate it, and live and breathe it. So it kind of starts from the top. So we kind of say, hey, on Fridays, let's leave at 3:00.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason we do that is yes, we want to have a good work culture, but we're also doing it, like, I kind of like to define culture as maybe what your significant other would say about the company.
Yeah.
Because those
What
are
a
the
good
people.
way to put that.
It is.
So for example, my wife has an opinion of Beta Bay based off of what I tell her, which is the good and the bad, but it's an unfiltered version because I trust her.
Right.
And every person in our entire organization has that.
Right.
And so, again, we're in construction.
Did you coin that? Or have you heard that somewhere?
I think I did, but I'm
'Cause
sure,
I'm gonna steal the
I'm sure
shit
someone
out of
can
that.
Google it in 2 seconds and find
No,
that I
I'm-
wasn't the first one to say it. So.
No, I'm going to steal the shit out of that. I'm going to use it every chance I get.
That's
I'm gonna
really
get
cool.
rewarded
I don't even
for
need
my
credit for it.
larceny.
You're good. Yeah.
Matt Pye.
That's right.
USOB.
Who can get it out there first?
That's great.
That's absolutely fantastic.
But it makes so much sense. I mean,
It does.
there's no explanation like really like behind that. Like a lot of people need to dive into certain quotes or certain theories on businesses. It's like, yeah, that totally makes sense right away.
Well, the thing with culture, I remember I was going to an executive coach at the time, and we were creating a culture statement. And I really created what I would consider a pretty badass culture statement, right? And we also had this Beta Bay mindset. So we had 2 documents, culture statement and mindset. And I worked on it. I took it very seriously. Did a bunch of research, kind of used certain words, and words matter, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Acronyms, things like that. And so when I kind of went into his office, I'm like, I'm done. Check this out, man. This is great. And he's like, wow, really good. He's like, you're not done. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the hard part now is just living, breathing it, messaging it. And I'm like, oh crap, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And 100% it is.
Right.
And 100% he was correct, right? So words that we put on the wall are meant to be reminders,
Yeah.
but you really need to live and breathe it.
Yeah.
And you need to message it, you need to reward it, and you need to hold people accountable to it. And so, one of the things that you've heard is kind of cliche, does every single person in your organization know what your vision statement is? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And, right now I can't look you guys in the eye and say all 75 people could say it. I do know a lot of them could because we say it a lot, right? But that's partly on me.
Yeah.
Am I messaging it properly? Are we reinforcing things properly? And so, our vision statement is to be the construction firm of choice.
Yeah.
And that's a 360 view, right? It means subcontractors, vendors, employees, clients, banks, you name it, community.
Right.
So that's kind of, and we're trying to come up with words and phrases that are very easy to remember but are impactful.
Yeah.
So our mission statement, it used to say, cycle time, budget, we're a great GC, we can do it on budget, and yes, but that's kind of expected.
Right.
If you're my client, don't you expect me to hit the
absolutely,
budget? Don't you expect me to
100%,
hit the timetable I said? So,
Yeah.
why is that a competitive edge? Why am I bragging, or why am I saying that's my mission? That's what's expected of me.
Right.
So we're changing our mission statement actually right now, and it's going to be to build each and every project as if it were your own.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
to me, that mission of doing that is a mindset mission,
Yeah,
right?
it's
And
huge.
so you're making decisions based off of what you think is right for the project.
It says a lot more about it.
It does.
So
Yeah, the culture that's in the office should actually lead the words, and should be demonstrating what's on the wall versus the other way around. People shouldn't walk by the words and say, "Oh yeah, that's who we are." It should be, "Oh yeah, that's who we are." That's absolutely huge, and I love the fact that you're saying that you want everybody on the same sheet of music, that they want to build something as if it was for them.
Yeah.
Because anytime you talk to a contractor that's built their own house, how did they build it, man?
Yeah.
They build it like a brick shit house, right? They build it absolutely perfect to the T's, to the nines, 100%.
And if you're a real estate agent and you're selling a house that was a really good builder's house, right?
Absolutely.
You're almost using that as a competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, this was so-and-so's
100%.
house.
That's
and,
right.
and to your point, right? It's everything behind the walls.
That's right.
Is put together probably really well.
That's exactly right.
Not just what you see. So
Yeah, that's a great. That absolutely will take off for you. And it says it says your story. That's huge.
The one thing I would add too on the so in our beta bay mindset, there's three things, and I'll give credit to people that we kind of took some of this from. One is the sundown habit, and so that was Sam Walton kind of came up with that.
Yeah.
And what that basically says is that you communicate with your team before the sun goes down.
Right.
A lot of the guys will say to me, "Well, hey, I didn't know the answer, or I didn't know when the inspector was going to come to the house." Well, communicating with your client that you don't know and that tomorrow you're going to find out is also an acceptable answer, right? So there is really no excuse for not communicating.
Totally.
The second one is Stephen Covey. So begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's just basically be proactive.
Right.
So we're trying to do things like, where's our schedule? Where's our buyout? Like, what can we do to kind of basically, what I always like to say is, let's bubble up all the crap and the problems in the air conditioning before a job starts.
Right.
Not when we're on a job site, it's hot and
have
I
to
need
get
it
fixed.
tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then the last one is we know within 5 minutes of getting on a job, whether it's on budget, on time. And so what I mean by that is just we try to encourage the superintendent, not try. We expect the superintendents to keep an organized job site. Is there proper signage? Is there safety, acknowledgement? Who's the leader? And you just know when you walk into a house or you walk into is it under control? Does it scream like professionalism to you?
Right.
And we've done job sites before where there's trash everywhere, it's unorganized, and it doesn't get there.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so just keeping that top of mind.
And it has an energy, just like you talked about at the Sand Pearl. It's got an energy.
Yeah.
You walk onto a site that seems disorganized, and there's trash floating around, and people are sitting around and smoking on the site and all that kind of, I mean, it just doesn't have the same energy as you walk in and everything's clean and organized. You feel like it's happening the way it's supposed to whenever it's like that. It's got that
Going
kind of
back to
energy.
Stephen Covey, right, beginning with the end in mind, when you are truly proactive, now it's so much easier to keep that momentum going, right? So
absolutely.
energy, momentum, for us, like it sounds a little bit like abstract, but momentum is a real thing.
Oh, sure.
So
hell yes.
when you're on a job site, right, for us from a construction standpoint, when you have momentum, it kind of keeps going. And yes, there could be little roadblocks, but how can I get it back as quick
It's
as possible?
contagious too.
Yeah,
Momentum is super contagious.
Yeah, we talk about the push and pull of things. Whenever you start off with something, you're pushing it to keep it moving in the direction it needs to. And then once it gets that momentum, it starts to pull you in the direction that you're supposed to go into, instead of you having to push it the whole time. It's a lot easier to do that than expect something to pull you and then have to push it later.
Yeah.
So absolutely, pushing it first to pull it.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah,
but people run their business like that, especially real estate agents. They struggle sometimes with it. They think that things are going to get better in the end, and I'll deal with that. I'll have that conversation later, or we'll handle that on the inspection instead of the contract on the front end, and they try to deal with those things later instead of allowing the last part of the transaction, which is the part everybody's going to remember.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing that last part of the transaction the way that they're supposed to, they kind of try to push everything to the end, and there's this big dramatic crescendo of bullshit that happens because they didn't want to deal with it on the front end the way they were supposed to.
Right.
Have a clean job site.
Right.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that culture bit, because I'm really big on ownership.
Oh, yeah.
And everything stems from culture, but being able to have each superintendent and each employee have ownership of their project, take pride in their project, creates that atmosphere and that gratitude for being there and wanting to make this thing succeed.
Absolutely.
Making, you want to be on time, you want to have a clean workplace, but that ownership key is really freaking hard to get.
It is. And one little disruptor in the middle of that can, if you got a superintendent that's not really bought into it, or you got a sub
you can
that's
have
not
some
really
bad
bought into
eggs.
it, and it makes it real difficult to keep all of that on track. But if it's your overall culture,
Yeah, and in today's environment, right? I mean, subcontractor, everybody's stretched too thin.
Yeah.
They don't have the correct skilled people out there, so there's new challenges that we're experiencing today that didn't exist, and so that's where you do have to morph and adapt and try and get an understanding of, hey, what are the issues I'm dealing with at a macro level today, and also ask the correct probing questions in the beginning.
Right.
If we're about to buy out, I'll make it up like a framer. How many jobs do you have going on right now? Do you have the right crew available for this one? Who
So
would be
tell
your
me
crew
what
leader?
you mean by buy 'em out. Tell me what.
So buyout means that if we have a $1 million job, and let's say we're trying to build it for $900,000, so we have $900,000 of costs associated with subcontractors, right?
Right.
From site development, concrete, masonry, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, framing, finishes, that kind of thing.
Right.
So what we do is we go through and identify all their proposals, and we qualify them. We put together a work order. We make sure we have a full understanding of it. We bind them to the documents, and then what we call buy them out means basically sending a work order in saying that you are bought to do that job.
Okay.
So
I gotcha.
an electrician, you gave me a proposal for $100,000, and now I need to tweak this, tweak that, tweak this, and so we are buying you out now for 103. That's your work order. There's
Yeah.
timetables associated
Okay.
with that. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Perfect.
sorry, just throw that out there.
No, that's good.
Something I wanted to bring up to go back to kind of the story, and I want to bring it back by starting kind of where you're at now, and then bring it back to the major transition that kind of made Beta Bay boom. So can I go over your Business Observer numbers and all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah.
Which is insane. So this is on Business Observer. It was the top 50 contracting companies in Florida.
Florida or West Florida? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see
high
here.
five on that shit.
Yeah.
Way to go.
So 75 employees. Well, at this time it was 57, but 2018 gross revenue 75 million.
Wow.
2017 gross revenue, was 58 million. So they had a 29.3%
Wow.
jump. And I know 2019 is already looking ridiculous for you. I talked to John about it. I was like, holy smokes. So your 2019 numbers are going to blow away 2018, right?
Yeah, and I mean it should be a little bump up, and I love John, but you always have those good biz dev guys that Rosie, and so
John's good at what he does.
Yeah. So
He's a rock star.
all I think about with John in our life is how do we fulfill? Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Sorry. So going back to that. So obviously, this is a highly successful company. I have like several articles pulled up here that it's just ridiculous. And what we actually went into the culture and teamwork bit that I actually wanted to cover. But the important part is that you guys are extremely successful commercial contracting company. When you started the company, it was completely residential.
Yep.
And whether you're in real estate, construction, I don't care what you're in, the biggest issue individuals have is stepping over that line of certainty.
Yep.
Okay. And so that uncertainty just, gets that anxiety going like we were talking about, and gets the fear just flying off the shelf, right?
$1,000
Right.
when you're doing
So
kitchens. Yeah.
how do you transition, even though there was an opportunity there presented to you, go from, hey, we're doing a pretty damn good job, where you said we did like 50 to 75 homes residential, to going, you know what, we're going to make this leap of faith into commercial, and now look at you. But how did that look to you? I mean, were there sleepless nights? Was there questions? I mean, what did that look like?
Yeah, so for us, if you make a statement saying that you want to be a truly scalable, sustainable organization, right? I would argue that the residential construction world, I don't really know anybody that's truly scalable, truly sustainable in residential construction. So think about it, unless you want to start talking about the production builders like D.R. Horton, Lennar,
Right. Yeah.
Kip. So when you look at the custom world, I mean, really think about it. Do we know any custom home builders that do anything more than just Tampa Bay or West Florida even?
No.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of some good ones right now, but their capacity, if they're doing $1 million houses, or even if they're doing $500,000,
You have a ceiling.
You have a ceiling. So, I just think it's difficult to trust your clients, to trust someone other than me or Jerome to be able to truly fulfill, and it's so personal, right? So you're getting phone calls at nighttime, you're getting phone calls on the weekend because usually they work. So I guess
Your customer base is a more regional, bigger customer base too than the custom builder, right? I mean that impacts
100%,
Right.
and it's also repeat, right? So when if you're building a house with your wife, okay, I get it, but how many times are you doing that even over a 20-year period?
Right.
Maybe 2 or 3.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't know what the average time of a home. Last I read was like 6-7 years. So let's just say, for sake of argument, at most you're building a house 3 times over a 20-year period.
Yeah.
So for us, once we always kind of learn that once you do one job with one person or one client, you learn, right? Lessons learned, going back to that part of our conversation. And so then what we kind of say is, okay, we know we're going to make money on job 2 through infinity.
Right.
And so, from that standpoint, what I would kind of say from a transition from residential to commercial, and I think I'm answering your question here, is just it wasn't scalable. It wasn't truly sustainable. It required too much of our time, and it also took away a little bit from the work-life balance for us, relative to having younger kids and things like that. So it was easier for us to pivot into construction because we were able to make it more consistent, make it more scalable. And now you can kind of see, you know, we're from a regional standpoint, we know how to play in the construction world all the way from Texas to the Mid-Atlantic and everything southeast of that.
Right.
Which is crazy. I mean,
So-
the growth is just ridiculous. I mean, to go through that.
Well, that's because their clients love them, man. They're doing a great job for the people that they deal with, and so those people want them to do that. You know, those folks are making their money working a bunch of different places, and they want to make sure that they have somebody reliable to deal with. So they're calling these guys and saying, "Hey, we need you to handle this for us." So, which actually brings me to part of what I wanted to talk about. So you've got all this growth, right? And you've mentioned John, your biz dev guy, right? How do you generate business other than referrals? I know you're killing it. Yeah. So how do you make that happen?
Yeah. So our take on biz dev right now, right? So speaking of Gary Vee and Kate in my office, she's big into Gary Vee, so we share a lot of podcasts and send articles to each other. You know, there's a big difference.
You can share Brokers Open.
There you go. Well, definitely we'll do that.
We're definitely Gary Vee level. Sorry.
Yeah. But you know, there's definitely, and I think Gary Vee says this. You know, there's a big difference between biz dev and sales and marketing, right? Or let's say sales and marketing. And
Huge difference. People don't realize that.
And so we recently actually just hired a marketing coordinator, and she's doing. She knows what she's doing. She's doing a really good job. She's just been here a few weeks, but for us, we were all when I said earlier fulfillment. You know, John was doing really good, and really we never really worried about sales. We always had work over the last pipeline. 12 years. It was always about making sure that we were able to fulfill it. And so all we focused on was creating scalable systems from the operational standpoint, because there's no point to do a job with somebody and then you don't have a good experience, they don't like you, and then you never get to do it again. Like I said before, you're not really making enough money on the first one. You kind of do well after you work out the kinks and figure some things out. So from that standpoint, that's my take on biz dev. From a marketing standpoint, I think that you can have a great, like Gary Vee says, you can have an unbelievable marketing campaign and you can touch more people than one guy going and getting a sandwich or a beer or fishing with one person, right? So what's really scalable, and when you think about it, whether it's podcasts, whether it's your collateral on your website, just how do we continue to build Bay to Bay as a brand? And does everybody actually know what we're doing? And what I would say is over the last 6 years, some people do, some people don't. So what's going to happen over the next 18 months is everybody's going to know exactly what we do. Everybody's going to be branded. And so we're kind of at that inflection point because our goal is to get to 150 million. Right. And so right now we're kind of halfway there. And it's funny how sometimes it gets a little easier at certain, right? There's these kind of milestones, so to speak. So right now is the first time we're needing marketing and sales to continue to fuel the growth, because John's just one guy. He's kind of a department of one. It's not really structured. That's a department that we could actually do better at structuring. You know, what CRM are we using? How are we talking about it? Are we being intentional? And to be honest with you, up until recently, we haven't had to worry about it. And so that's a blessing at some level. But now we do need to worry about it. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. I mean, it's a joke, but I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. And so I've kind of struggled with that a little bit. I'm kind of right on that generation of, you know, it didn't come super easy for me. I wouldn't do it. And other people are doing it. And I don't like it from a personal standpoint because I just don't want the gossip and that kind of stuff.
Totally agree.
But there's also tons of pros associated with it. Right? In terms of awareness and if it's done right. So anyway, so we're kind of transitioning, if that answers your question.
It does, yeah. So what you're basically doing, it sounds like, is, you know, for a long time you have been, you've been supporting the sale with the service. And now you're trying to support the service with the sale. And so you're kind of flipping how you're generating some of that business, it sounds like, so that you can move into a different arena so you don't hit that plateau again. You know, it sounds like you're kind of trying to, the same way you took that step into commercial, you're trying to take that step into a different arena. Because I'm assuming if you're a top 50 at 75 million, 150 million, shit gets really thin with who's up at the top,
You're probably top 5 at that point.
Yeah. So you're going from, you know, being a great regional person that's doing great and building your business and has a good reputation and all that kind of stuff. Now you're trying to take that to a whole different level, the same way you did with the commercial.
And it's different, man. And it's different clients, right? Yeah. So, you know, yes, I just made a comment about, you know, what I kind of consider structured versus non-structured, or let's say a residential house for $1 million compared to something else. And so I do think that, you know, whether you're a real estate broker or any many, but you want structured environments, because when you have a structured environment, it's easier to scale. So what do I mean by that? Companies like the Fortune 500 companies, they have structure. So they have a construction budget. They have goals and initiatives. They have construction management teams. They have professional invitations to bid. They have professional construction documents. So you can, once you kind of figure that out and you're welcome to the table, now you just kind of go in and try to crush that, as opposed to it being, oh, well, it's all verbal and just do the best you can and give me a proposal in the next 2 weeks. And it's non-structured. So
almost like it's getting into the civil arena with municipalities and stuff like that. We talked to somebody not long ago, and that's what they were saying was
he knows Dallas Lamberson.
Oh yeah, so we're talking to Dallas.
Dallas came on.
And so that's what he was saying is they've got a real structured way that they deal with the proposals from municipalities and stuff like that, and some of what they do with his team to keep them excited and motivated would not work if they didn't have to deal with that part. Because he was talking about, whenever they get the bid, they're all sitting there and they know how to know their bid compared to everybody else and everything. So part of the excitement and culture of what he did is based on that process of who he was dealing with as a client, which is huge. And that's what you're doing.
And
that's
Dallas was funny, because I remember I asked him, I go, hey, what's your marketing budget? He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, what do you mean what do I mean? Like, how much? He's like, oh, we don't spend anything because we deal with municipalities. You obviously aren't whining and dining them because they're not allowed to do that. And so I'm like, so your marketing budget is zero? He's like, yeah. And the reason there's a heightened kind of like, because it's a closed bid.
That's right.
You open it up, right? It's like this monument. Did I get it? Did I not?
Right.
And so in our world, we don't play in that public arena as much, and so it's more on relationships. Right. So
it is funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
But relationships for me, I've got a pretty decent sized marketing budget, right? John Downs is in Boca Grande right now for the last 6 weeks for 6 weeks, and bringing clients in. And the reason we're doing that is to create rapport, right? Create trust, because when all of a sudden a situation happens, you can pick up the phone real quick. We're just trying to work through it as opposed to posture. So there's time and energy and money that's required a lot of times in business for relationships. And my guess is, again, depending on who's listening, you've got the residential arena with brokers, you've got the commercial arena with brokers, you've got structured, you've got non-structured, and I would view kind of similar to what I said in the real estate broker world. Residential is not structured, right? There's very few people that you're going to go sell 15 houses for over the next 2 years. In the commercial world, when you talk about Cushman Wakefields, JLLs, things like the Marcus Millichap, right? Those guys are dealing with particular segments with particular people, and they've got repeat clients. So it's a different structured, scalable game.
Repeatable experience, right? Yeah, that's a good point.
Not emotion based. It's all based on their money performing at a certain level.
Yeah, they talk differently, right? They're more in tune with the financing. They talk about cap rates. They're trending. They're using historical analysis. I mean, you look at the I forget what they actually call them, but abstracts or something where, hey, here's a property that I'm selling. I mean, it's super professional. Here's the demographics. Here's my 1 mile ring. Here's my 3 mile ring. Here is the metrics associated with it. On the residential side, I don't know what everybody does now, but it just seems like, hey, MLS pictures. Maybe I'm into drones and that kind of thing. But what is the thing that you're doing to make it scalable, make it sustainable? And when I think about residential real estate brokers, one thing I think about is who are the 5 people in your life, or who are the 5 people within your network that are literally bringing potentially 80%? Because there are people of influence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Whether it's a chair of a board or something. And anyways, there's lots of different ways to get it. But, I think it's being conscious of who are you talking to.
This is good wrap-up talk. I mean, we've got a couple minutes left, but it's interesting to compare. And I often get agents who come into my office and ask, commercial sounds really cool. There's a lot of bread involved, yada, yada. But there's a huge, huge gap between commercial and residential.
Absolutely.
And the simplest way to dumb it down is that you have a lot of residential real estate is run by emotion, because you're selling somebody's baby, right? And then on commercial, the numbers work or they don't work. You got to be able to present and do that. But it's a bottom line factor, and you do experience that in residential, but you don't have the emotion tied to it, right? And so in order for people to get that, and people get into real estate for different reasons, people don't see that right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you made an interesting point just a minute ago. So things have changed on the residential side, that they're delivering a higher amount of information. And the reason why is because what they used to be able to hold up to their chest and say, you have to come talk to me for this information, that's readily available.
Right.
So great agents are having to dig in a little bit more specifically with some of the things that go on. But as they do that, the expectation on the commercial side is even bigger.
Yep.
And so what the commercial agent has to come to the table with in order to do it, they can't show up with the same thing that they could 5 years ago, 8 years ago.
Right.
The demographics are available on the residential side. So you can't show up to somebody who their baby is a pile of cash that they work their ass off to get, and show up with the same thing that you'd have in order to try to sell a house for them. They're not going to do it. They're not going to appreciate it. They're not going to want it. They're going to know something's not right. The days of holding the information against your chest are wrong. They're long gone. That's the wrong way of looking at it. Now it has to be about, what does that information mean? You have to be intelligent about what that information means. You have to be intelligent and accurate and timely with that information. Residential and commercial, but commercial still stays way ahead of that.
What's interesting about this, and I think that you're going to find this interesting, and you were kind of getting there by what you were saying, is that we're in the age of information, especially in the residential real estate side, in that the consumer knows more and is more savvy than ever, right? So your average homeowner knows a whole lot more than they did 10 years ago.
Right.
But what happens with that is the cream rises to the top.
That's
Okay,
right.
so what I'm experiencing with a lot of realtors out there is you're starting to see the real companies and the real agents really get the business.
Absolutely.
Okay, and you're starting to see a bigger divide between the part-time agents or the people who just have their licenses and the people who really kick ass at
The
what they
hobbyists.
do.
And I
So-
love that, by the way. We're both big advocates of that stretch.
Yeah, it's
So-
huge. So we focus on the people who want to be there, but it's the difference is the value add. And in today's technology day and age, if the realtor is not focused on the value add portion of their business, they will die.
Yep.
And I know that that's true in your business too, but it's fun to see that transition because I think it's something that the real estate industry has needed for a long time.
Agreed.
It's almost like a cleanup, right? Like
It
a
is.
natural
Yeah.
cleanup.
I
In our
certainly
world,
hope so.
what we're realizing, everybody, if you open up the papers today, right, it probably says something about construction booming and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so what's actually happening in our world from a general contractor standpoint is there's a ton more risk.
Oh,
And I mean, I won't name them, but there's a half dozen companies that have literally gone out of business in the last 18 months. And I can't find on the newspaper where that's being reported.
Right.
And so for us, that's good, right? So
It
again,
is.
I think that's a natural trait of
Right.
rising to the top because the reason they're going out of business is that people are holding them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
You said you could do something for $1 million. Now you're trying to get a change order for 1.2 when it's unjustified. The answer is no.
Right.
Okay, so go write a check and you start fighting. And so that's risk, right? And so
Right.
we're trying to make sure that we're cognizant of it. And also in our strategy,
I love
what we're
it.
doing is we're being very cognizant and trying to be aware of, hey, what are some lessons learned from the last downturn? And we actually have an article that there's 7 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And we grade ourselves really good on managing 5 of the 7. So the to-do list for the rest of the year is
Yeah,
what are
you
we
got
doing
2
on number
more.
6, number 7 to make sure, look, if it happens, when it happens, I don't know if we want to dive into that, but we just want to make sure we're prepared.
Yeah,
we're doing
absolutely.
the right thing so
Absolutely.
that we can continue. Because the ones that, to use your phrase, cream rise to the top, if the world changes a little bit, the top's going to just shuffle, right?
Right.
Yeah, you might be down 15, 20%. You might be down 30%, right?
Right.
But you're not going to get crushed and die.
Right.
And so for me, it's just a
Yep.
function of let's make sure that we can sustain. And then when the world changes back again, maybe there's more opportunities and things
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful thing, though, and that's the evolution of a good business person and good companies, and I think that is just a testament to all the good realtors out there, entrepreneurs, business people. I love that aspect of it, and that's where you need to focus.
Working in his business.
Yeah.
I know that's so cliche, and we hear it all the time, right? Working in your business versus on your business and all that kind of stuff. It sounds like everything that you've done, you've kept a progression going forward of direction to make sure you had a mission statement, right? And you said, okay, that's not good enough, right? You had a vision statement, that's not good enough. We need to evolve, we need to change. Offices that are residential, right?
Yeah.
So all of that is huge. That's all
and
good stuff.
I think
it's forward thinking.
everybody at the end of the day, you just need to be aware, right? Because like right now, myself and Kate Rogers in my office in particular, we're aware that we're actually really busy. We
Yeah.
might even be too busy. We might be doing so. Then you just say self-reflect. Am I delegating enough? Is my structure correct? Right? Because we should be working on the business more than in the business at this stage.
Yep.
And also, I like using the word intentional. So we always just need to be intentional, right? Every single decision, every single milestone, let's do it on purpose as opposed to it just happened and we got lucky or we didn't and react.
Love
So,
it.
and a lot of that I think ties back to organization. So I think going back to the realtor, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I like what you said in the beginning, like the first 2 hours of the day, like the most successful people for
Absolutely.
sure that I know of the vast majority of the most successful people are highly, highly organized.
Right.
From 8 o'clock till 9 o'clock, I'm doing this. From 9 o'clock to 11. Now,
Schedule.
look, it doesn't mean you can't have a little distraction because it's still the world. We get it.
Yeah.
But they are super, super organized, and then they just go execute on their plan.
Intentional.
Because
that's right.
and when you're working on the business, you come up with a strategy. Okay, cool. Now you did it. Now it's just a reminder, and you don't have to think about it anymore. Stop using that brain power. Just go follow the rules you set.
That's right.
And get into execution mode.
And it almost becomes like second nature once you start doing it like
Pushing
that. So
forward,
it's sweet. I definitely want to have you back on, man.
Yeah,
This
we've
is
got to. Yeah,
this
because I know
this
we're
hour.
nowhere near done.
Yeah, no problem. For
It
sure.
took us 30 minutes ago.
I'm a
It was
little
20s.
upset.
Yeah. I'm still 28 in the story.
We got to circle back around.
Yeah.
Well, after you turn 40, we'll have you back on.
There you go, man.
So before we take off, we ask everybody a couple of things. So what are you grateful for is one of them.
Three
And then-
things you're grateful for.
And then great books that you've read. What's a great book that you read that you really loved? You mentioned Robert Kiyosaki, right? Rich Dad,
Yeah,
Poor Dad.
that was back in the day. So the other one you'll like is Justin is Extreme Ownership.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
A friend of mine
Who's that by
actually.
again?
Yeah, Jacko.
We hear it every podcast.
So that's a good one. I actually I'm trying to think from a book standpoint. Good to Great. I like
Oh,
Jim
yeah.
Collins. What I've been doing a lot of lately, to be honest with you, is podcasts and YouTube videos.
Oh yeah.
And that's in the last 2 years. So my go-to is I do have a thing. So Simon Sinek. I love Simon Sinek.
Yep.
I like Gary Vee.
Right.
I also there's a thing called getabstract.com. Getabstract.com.
Haven't
And so
heard of it.
basically what it does is it takes business books and summarizes them into 10 pages, and you can kind of read that. So I'm big on trying to just at least, and if I really like the summary, I'm
Then
going to
you
go
go
buy the
through it,
book. Yeah.
Cool.
And then from a grateful standpoint, so from a business standpoint, I would say in terms of what I'm grateful for, 100% is the people. Like I don't want to brush over that at all. Like that matters big time.
100%
And so
agree.
getting the right people, getting to make sure that they're all aligned, being super authentic with them, and just trying to be as honest as we possibly can, good, bad, ugly, so that we can always continue to raise the bar.
Yeah.
In a growth environment, you deal with, okay, well, yeah, who we were 2 years ago is going to be different than big time different than who we are 2 years from now.
Right.
So just talk about it, because change, no matter who you are, right? It's a little bit discomfort. So you got to get out of your comfort zone.
Right.
So grateful for that. From a personal standpoint, definitely my family and health. So for the most part, it's like, I mean, I'm honestly a little baby. Like if I get a cold, like I want to call my wife or my mom. I'm just like, so yeah. So that reminds me, like, man, when you are feeling healthy, my dad always uses the terminology being a corporate athlete. And so, I was a soccer player growing up, and so that was kind of like my thing, and I was in great shape at the time, and then surfing, and then you're kind of like, man, I'm a business guy now, I'm a desk guy. And so, but I think it's important to just still remember, hey, yeah, you're still burning calories, you're still doing things in a different way. And so the guys I know that are ultra successful or cream of the crop, so to speak, they have a diligent workout plan, they're eating pretty healthy, they're doing those kind of things.
Right.
So I'll stick with those two probably for
cool.
now.
Hey, that's great. It's
Making up for it.
fantastic.
Yeah.
We love it.
Well,
look, we got to get you back on here.
Yeah.
Sounds good, man. I'd be look forward to it. So.
And so, how can people find you if they want to learn more about Beta Bay? How do they get connected with you? What do they do? Is there an email address?
Yeah,
phone
so
number?
I'll share that, no problem. So betabayproperties.com, and then also my first initial, so J, and then my last name Faw, F as in Frank, AW at betabayproperties.com is my email address.
Perfect.
Go
Love
check
it.
out their Facebook page. I got a really good Facebook page. I follow that on a daily basis.
Nice.
So they do an awesome job. But thanks again, man. Appreciate you having me.
Appreciate
We
you
love
having me.
it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Cool,
All
bro.
right, thanks.
All right.